You're listening to the Bail in the Midwest podcast.
Hello and welcome to the Bail in the Midwest podcast, where we explore a variety of topics related to bail, pretrial release, and the criminal justice system in the Midwest. My name is Shane Rolf. I'm the Executive Vice President of the Kansas Bail Agents Association, and I've worked in this field for the past 35 years. Now, just this past week, Merriam-Webster announced its 2022 word of the year. That word was gaslighting. They define gaslighting as the act or practice of grossly misleading someone, especially for one's own advantage. The idea of a deliberate conspiracy to mislead has made gaslighting useful in describing lies that are part of a larger plan. But unlike lying, which tends to be between individuals, and fraud, which tends to involve organizations, gaslighting applies to both personal and political contexts. So, how does gaslighting apply to bail? In several of our past episodes, we've discussed how so-called bail reform has glaringly appeared to have directly led to an increase in crime and lawlessness. However, 3 days ago, NBC published an opinion piece titled, "Bail Reform is Working. Why are Democrats running away from it?" And that article tried to explain that, well, sure, crime was up. Bail reform couldn't possibly be the reason. My guest today should be able to give us some on-the-ground insight as to what is true and what is gaslighting on this topic. This is our very first guest with his very own Wikipedia page. Grady Judd has been a law enforcement officer for 50 years. He is currently the elected sheriff of Polk County, Florida, a position he has held for the past 18 years. He is the only sheriff in the history of Polk County to have been elected to 5 terms as sheriff. He is the past president of the Florida Sheriff's Association, the past president of the Major County Sheriffs of America, a graduate of the FBI National Academy. He is a commissioner of the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School Public Safety Commission, which was formed after the mass shooting at the school in Parkland, Florida. He was appointed by the President of the United States to the Coordinating Council on Juvenile Justice and Delinquency Prevention. And he is currently Sheriff of the Year for the MCSA. Sheriff Judd, welcome to the podcast.
It's certainly my honor to be with you today and to discuss this topic.
Thanks, Sheriff. Is there anything that you would like to add to that somewhat shortened version of what is clearly a very impressive resume?
No, I think that pretty well covers it. I did have the opportunity to teach 23 years in the undergraduate program at the University of South Florida and also Florida Southern College. So I've had one foot in the academic world while one foot in what I call the real operational world. So I've seen these issues from 2 perspectives, from an operational reality, and then from an academic best practice, the way we'd love the world to be, but it's really not. So I bring, I think, a broad sense of this conversation to common sense. And that's what we're going to talk about, common sense response today.
I do kind of shudder sometimes when I hear the phrase best practices, because oftentimes it means somebody who doesn't know what they're doing trying to overlay their opinion onto your particular situation.
That is absolutely correct, depending on who is in charge of best practices.
Exactly. Now let's touch on a couple of points the NBC article makes that certainly look like gaslighting to me. Quote this here, quote, "Bail reform has been a win for fiscal responsibility, saving taxpayers millions of dollars by avoiding the cost of unnecessary mass detention." Now, I've always viewed this cost-saving argument rather dubiously. It's almost exclusively done in one of 2 ways. Either they treat jails like hotel rates and assume that an empty jail cell doesn't cost anything, or they don't really mention that reducing these jail costs really means firing the staff at these jails and eliminating law enforcement. So as someone who is responsible for jail budgets, how does bail reform actually save the taxpayers millions of dollars?
Well, first and foremost, I can tell you that whenever you start equating public safety to dollars, what's your life worth? So had you rather pay taxes for jails and be safe, or would you rather have empty jails and be in a more precarious position in the community where you've lost faith in the system, you've lost faith in the ability to be saved, and you don't thrive anymore? So then the cost of the jail will go down. That's an accurate statement. So if you totally empty all the prisons out and close them down, then you will save that money. But what you don't measure with that is how much crime and how many victims are there when the people in jail aren't in jail, stealing your property, shooting you, murdering, and selling drugs, which addicts people and sends more people to their death from overdose and more people to the hospital at a greater cost. So there has to be a balance in our system. You have to have a robust criminal justice system if you're going to be safe and feel safe. When you let people out of prison, people in the community don't feel safe. We have data that tells us about 68% of the people that leave jail for whatever reason, because they're not required to post a bail or they complete a sentence, about 68% of them will re-offend within 3 years. So think about that. The overall arch or nexus to this, the big arch is when we let criminals out of jail, we don't hold them accountable, we don't make them responsible, then they think they're free to commit more crime because, heck, there's nothing to this. There's no accountability. There's no responsibility. We had what we didn't call it bail reform. We had overcrowding here in the 80s. And we had a Dakin order that said for every person you put in the jail, you've got to let one out. So literally the sergeant in charge of book-in, when you would bring somebody into the jail, would look at your charges and say, look, is this guy in for a major event or a minor event? So if you brought someone in for robbery, he would have to scour through the people that were in jail and see which one was in for something not as violent or not as dangerous as the robbery and let them out of jail in order to put another one in jail. So at the end of the day, what happens? When you let those people out, does the government staff you to go chase the people that don't show up when you let them out of jail without posting a bail? No. Do the people show up voluntarily for court? The overwhelming majority do not. So at the end of the day, what's happening if you don't have a bail system is the government should chase you, but usually doesn't. And you just meander through the community, continuing to commit crime. When if you use private enterprise, i.e. bail agents and bail companies, then if the folks don't show up, then the private enterprise, the bail folks, go bring them to you to ensure that you can ensure that they're at the appropriate court hearings. So at the end of the day, the bail system has worked great for decades and decades and decades. And when we were forced to a hiatus without a bail system during the overpopulation of the jail, and the courts decided they'd go in a no bail jail environment, it did not work. And our crime went up in the 80s, and crime went up across this entire state and nation. So the bottom line to it, the failure of having a bail system puts greater stress on the government actors to keep you safe. Your crime's going to go up, and you're going to be more likely to be not only a victim of nonviolent crime, but a victim of violent crime. You're going to lose faith in the government. You're going to lose trust in your elected officials, and you're not going to be safe. So you don't thrive as well. So I become very frustrated when I read and someone tries to say, oh, this is going to save us. No, it's not. It may save you money out of this pot, but it will cost you much, much, much more when you look at the theft, you look at the violence, you look at the hospitalization cost, you look at the entire package. A criminal that is prolific outside of jail is much more expensive to you and the community than the criminal locked up in jail where you're safe, and it's less expensive to house them than it is to follow behind them and pay the bills from the carnage they create.
No, I agree. And one of the pillars of any organized society is the ability to enforce the laws that that society sets forth for how you function within that society. And if you don't have law enforcement to back that up, then those laws basically are meaningless. And if there's no consequences to you violating those laws, i.e., maybe we'll pick you up, maybe we'll put you on this revolving door right back out to jail, then those consequences are meaningless. Another gaslighting thing that was in that article was the statement that bail reform has also proved that you can maximize freedom while not endangering public safety. Now, I think that's probably ridiculous. They claim that New York City has remained secure, even though the headlines would make you think otherwise. The Big Apple is one of the safest cities in the United States. And while it may be true that New York still is one of the safest cities, it's not as safe as it used to be. From your perspective, how does this revolving door catch and release approach to pretrial release, how does that impact crime rates? And I know you sort of touched on that earlier, but maybe just talk about what happens when somebody just cycles to the jail with not even a speed bump, basically, of interrupting their criminal behavior.
Sure. First and foremost, that's fiction. Now, I'm not denying that per capita, maybe they're safer in New York than they are in San Francisco or Los Angeles. But are you comparing the cream of the crop or the cream of the crap? So if everybody's got a high crime rate, you go, but my crime rate's less. But if your crime rate in New York is 4 or 5 or 10 times what my crime rate is in Polk County, then you're not safe. You are less safe than you are here. You're just more safe than maybe you are in New Orleans. But at the end of the day, crime does not go down, and you are not safer when you don't hold people accountable and you don't keep them locked up in jail. I have yet to see someone that is locked up in jail commit a burglary in a community. I have yet to see someone locked up in jail robbing somebody at gunpoint. So the bottom line is that crime goes up when people aren't incarcerated and people are put at risk. It doesn't work. It didn't work in the 80s when we tried it. I suggest to you that if you look back in sometimes in the 40s, 50s, or 60s, they probably had this wild notion then, and it didn't work then. Look, if it worked, I'd be all for it. If letting people out of jail caused crime to go down, I'd be the biggest cheerleader. But that's just not true. And anybody that tells you any different is just flat lying to you. But I've found out over my lifetime, and I've done this. I started working law enforcement here when I was 18. I'm 68. I've done this 50 years, 5 decades. I have found when someone will lie to you long enough and loud enough with enough enthusiasm without any contrary data, that all of a sudden that becomes fact or accurate fact or truth. Well, it's not the truth. Just because they say it doesn't mean it's true. You're at risk when you're not keeping folks locked up in jail or releasing them under the supervision of a bail agent who has the responsibility to get them back to court on court day. Folks come to court when all of a sudden mama's put her house up to secure the bail. If they love their mama, they show up for court. If you release them without posting a bail, they don't show up for court. Their mama's house is not at risk.
Right. There's no incentive. There's no accountability.
None.
One of the things we might be able to talk about a little bit is sort of the role of the progressive prosecutor in this whole scenario. Andrew Warren, I don't know if you want to get too much into this, but is a so-called progressive prosecutor, is in the county right next door to yours. And he's in the news currently as he's challenging his removal from office by the governor for publicly refusing to prosecute certain crimes, the so-called prosecutor's veto. As I said, he was the state's attorney in the county right next to yours. Can you give us some insights into how crime was being prosecuted or not prosecuted under his watch, and how is having a progressive prosecutor, in air quotes, right next door impacted crime and criminal behavior and quite frankly, attitudes of what I guess in the way to say this is a criminal class, but people who tend to get arrested the attitudes of those people in your county? How has that impacted you being right next door?
Certainly, I can tell you clearly and unequivocally, if you don't hold people accountable, if you don't draw a big yellow line and say, look, this on this side of the line, you're being legal. On that side of the line, you're being illegal. If you don't have that clear line of demarcation, then the criminal does what the criminal wants to do. And when Andrew Warren comes out and said, oh, by the way, I'm not going to prosecute these crimes, he's not looked at the evidence. He just says, I'm going to do this. First off, he's not being honorable or faithful to the people elected him. When he did not march up and down on the campaign trail saying, I am unilaterally not going to enforce these laws. And he doesn't have that authority. He took an oath of office to enforce the laws and to protect the Constitution of the state of Florida and the United States. And now he's not doing that. So here's what occurs as I share with people. Think about your 10 best buddies. Y'all hang together. You go to the bowling alley together. You party together. And one of the 10 of you that you went to high school with and you've been friends with is always in trouble. The cops are always picking him up and locking him up. Next thing you know, he's in jail. He's having to post a bail, or he's getting 90 days or 180 days. And gosh, he committed a burglary and they sent him away for 2 or 3 years. And the rest of us, the other 9 of us, look at him and say, our buddy here just stays in trouble all the time. He's either running from the law, he's in jail, he's in prison. But we don't do that, because we don't want that hassle in our personal lives. But when you have an Andrew Warren or a no bail jail, or they say we're not going to prosecute these minor offenses, and all of a sudden your buddy shows up with a $600 tennis shoes that he stole because it's a misdemeanor and anything less than $900. He's showing up with the designer jeans. He's showing up with the latest bling, and he says, hey, we're all in California. Misdemeanors, they don't put in jail. You can steal stuff all day long. Then what happens? The Me Too effect kicks in. So all the other 9 buddies are going to say, hey, they're not locking him up anymore. They're not making him go to jail or prison. He's got all the cool stuff and he's not paying for it and he's not working. So the Me Too effect kicks in and all the others do the same thing. So it's not a matter of we can't arrest our way out of this or we can't jail our way out of this. You're creating a culture and a social being of this conduct's not acceptable in society. So the 9 of the 10 of us go, we would steal too, but we don't want to go to jail. All of a sudden they're stealing because nobody's going to jail. Why shouldn't they? That's what's going on around this country now. Now, I've seen some people say, but look, our crime rate really didn't go up or didn't go up much at all. Well, do you know why? Because if your government actors, your cops, are not writing reports, they're not taking reports, they're not documenting the crime, then statistically on paper, it didn't occur. If you in your community, go New York, Portland, New Orleans, yeah, the murders are going to come to our attention eventually, and they're going to be written about. But all of a sudden, if I call the cops over and over and over, and they don't do anything about the guy sleeping on my doorstep, or the trespassing, or the drunk knocking the windows out of my house, or the minor burglaries, if the cops are not doing anything about it, I quit reporting it. So when they tell you that the crime really hasn't gone up that much, that's because people have lost faith and lost trust, and they don't report it. The cops all of a sudden are the bad guys in the community. The government's the bad guys in the community. So at the end of the day, don't believe those that don't tell you this. I've got empirical evidence in this county. Our crime is at a 50-year low. It's about to be at a 51-year low when you look at our index crimes because we put people in jail. I'll give you an example. Last week, 2 weeks ago, I guess it was the week before Thanksgiving, we had a guy go in a local convenience store and he got him a $2.19 drink. And he started out of the store and the lady said, "Sir, you've got to pay for your drink." And he said, "Okay." And he kept walking out and she called him at the door and said, "Sir, it's $2.19. You need to pay for your drink." And he goes, "Okay." And he opened the door and he walked out. She said, "Sir, you have stolen the drink. You've got to pay for this drink." He says, "Not today." And he got in his car. She got his tag number. She called the sheriff's office. We caught the guy down the road. There was the drink. We told him, "Sir, step out of the car." He said, "What for?" We said, "Well, we're taking you to jail." He said, "You're taking me to jail for stealing a $2.19 drink?" We said, "Yes, sir, we are." We put him in jail and we towed his car. So how much did that $2.19 drink cost him? A whole lot more than $2.19. Do you think he's going to get out of jail and go steal another $2.19 drink? No, because now he still hasn't been to court, but the system was in place to say there's accountability and responsibility. Oh, by the way, you still have to go to court for this. So at the end of the day, that's the difference. Do you think in California they would even give you a citation for stealing drinks? So my point is, in California, where they have no bail jail, misdemeanors don't go to jail, nobody's accountable. If you're thirsty, why shouldn't you go in the local convenience store and steal you a drink? The reality is, the reason you shouldn't is because it doesn't belong to you and you're a thief. We recognize that here, and that's why our crime's down. But it's, and would anybody even call about the theft of a $2.19 drink? And if you did, would the cops even send anybody or take a report? The answer to that is no in those areas.
Well, in those areas, and I think it's typical of sort of the attitude that you get from a progressive prosecutor or these types of areas, is that they seem to have lost the idea, and this is the idea that you're discussing. In large measure, the criminal justice system itself is about creating deterrence to bad action. While a sentence against one person or an arrest for something small might seem harsh, might seem excessive, if it prevents 5 or 10 additional crimes, has it had the intended effect? I mean, even you just look at somebody being pulled over for speeding on the side of the road. Suddenly, the entire road slows down when they see those flashing lights going. There's a deterrent effect of aggressive enforcement to where then you don't have to be as aggressive about the enforcement because they know the consequences are there.
And so when Andrew Warren doesn't prosecute people there, they think you can come here and do the same thing. Or we have a prosecutor that's much like Andrew Warren in Orlando in Orange County. And we every night are arresting people and chasing people from Orlando because they come here and think they can act here like they act there. We had 4 juveniles in a car come cross over onto the I-4 corridor into our county one night in a stolen vehicle, and we chased that vehicle. We chased that vehicle and it ran from us, and we boxed it up, and it crashed into the woods on the side of the road, on a feeder road to the interstate. They ran. We got canine there. We got them in a stolen vehicle. We got canine there, and we arrested 2. 2 of them continued to run, and they were apprehended by the canine. They were juveniles, 16, 17, 15. They looked us in the eye and go, "You let your dog bite us, and we're juveniles." We go, first off, we didn't know you were juveniles. Second off, we don't care. You're in a stolen car and you ran. Oh, one of the 4 had a murder warrant outstanding from Orange County. And they were shocked that we chased them, shocked that we boxed them up and ran them off into the woods, shocked that we put the canine on them, because that doesn't happen, because the prosecutor continues to let them out and not charge them with minor offenses. Well, the bottom line is you don't have the right to steal cars. You don't have the right to murder people. You don't have the right to flee. And, oh, by the way, did I tell you about the stolen guns that were in the car, with the exception of one of the guys had a stolen gun on him as a juvenile? Very dangerous people, but they were used to not being held accountable. Now, I can tell you, Florida's pretty tough overall. Tampa wants to be liberal with their not holding people accountable. The governor removed Andrew Warren for not enforcing the law. In Orlando, we have a much similar effect with people not being held accountable by the prosecutor over there. But at the end of the day, their crime rate per capita is higher, and the majority of those folks don't come over here. And when they do, they're met with a set of rules only following the state statute, that if you come here and you violate the law, you're going to get arrested, you're going to jail, and then you're going to have to get a bailsman, or you're going to sit in jail until it's court time. But you know what? Our crime's at a 50-year low. People are safe. They feel safe. They flourish here. I just had a meeting at lunch with about 50, 75 African-American ministers and lay ministers. And the response was, Sheriff, thank you. We're safe and we feel safe in our communities. And they volunteer in the jails. We make a positive difference in people's lives. We help people. This is not all being tough on the bad guys. This is encouraging the community to come together and work together. And that's what happens here. And that's what needs to happen there. But people don't have to live in the fear of being victimized every time they walk out their door in a lot of this country. And if you live that way in the community you're in, it's directly responsive to the people you elect to public office that make those decisions. They talk a silver tongue, slick words to you, and then they get in office and do like Warren did and said, I'm not going to prosecute these people. You don't get to do that in our society.
No, I mean, we have this system that's really quite elegant, checks and balances, but it does rely everybody in their particular roles doing the job that they're supposed to do. If you as a prosecutor don't want to prosecute a crime, your goal is to go to the legislature and say, hey, we really don't need to prosecute these. Legislature, you should remove this crime from the books, and the governor should sign off repealing that particular law. You shouldn't be able to as a prosecutor, and we've seen this happen from actually Barack Obama and Kamala Harris as well in California, to use that prosecutor's veto and just say, well, we're not enforcing this particular law because we don't like this law. I mean, there is a process we go through that's supposed to establish what the laws are and how they're enforced.
No, that's exactly correct.
I did touch earlier on your appointment to the Juvenile Justice Council, and it sort of gets towards bail, but what are some of the top things that work that you've learned from that council and that role to redirect juvenile defenders back onto the right path? Things like parental involvement are very important. My wife works in a school, and often the level of parental involvement relates directly to school success. But what are some of the other things in the juvenile justice area that can help at-risk youth or juvenile offenders get back on track?
It's interesting that you said that, because I was appointed by President Trump in the last 2 weeks of his presidency, but the appointment never came through. It's amazing. Apparently, when the new president came in, the paperwork was lost, and then they appointed someone else. But that's okay. I'm a big guy, but I can tell you that we have diversion programs here for juveniles. We evaluate each of the juveniles on their own merit. We know statistically that 75% of the juveniles that come in contact with law enforcement or the criminal justice system, 75% of them won't reoffend. They're one and done. We divert them. We make sure that they have counseling. We make sure we look into their home situation, and we dig deep. We believe in second chances and third chances. In fact, I got into a big fuss with the state of Florida when they wanted to go to pre-arrest diversion on juveniles, because they called it, I can't think of the term they use now, but it was only for misdemeanors. Civil citation. Oh, we're going to give civil citations. I wouldn't participate in the program because it was only for misdemeanors. We even allowed minor, and I put that in quotes because I don't think there's a minor felony, but say someone broke into an empty house and stole something. No one's life was at risk. It was an abandoned house. We would let that kid go into what we call our juvenile pre-arrest program in this county. So I resisted the civil citation, but we have teen court and we have systems and processes that we put people in. So that's not the problem because those kids are one and done. The problem is, and we are getting better. We weren't getting better for a while. At least we have the attention. The state of Florida, the criminal justice system for the state of Florida, Department of Juvenile Justice, couldn't tell the difference between a childish act that was a crime and a juvenile that was a prolific criminal offender. We can tell the difference. They couldn't. So at the end of the day, some of these kids were being given too much leniency, and it was back to there's no bright yellow line. So at the end of the day, here's what we say. We believe in pre-arrest diversion for juveniles. We believe in post-arrest diversion for some juveniles. But there's got to be meaningful counseling or accountability or reconstruction of their life through different programs and or medicines. If you don't do that, then you've got to have a program to put them in or a place to house them so that you get their attention. And we need to do that so that we stop them from being adult offenders. I think our pre-arrest diversion program is good here, but the deputies decide that based upon the crime and based upon guidelines we provide and based upon parental attitude. If the parents aren't engaged or involved, then we take a different approach because we've got to make sure if the parents aren't engaged, then the chances of a positive outcome for the juvenile are remarkably reduced. So at the end of the day, we work hard to differentiate between childish acts that are criminal and prolific criminal conduct by those that are juveniles.
Well, and so it's the parental involvement that I was sort of looking at because, it's one of the things that also translates over to the adult stage. I mean, crime is typically a young man's game. I mean, people do tend to ultimately grow out of it, but you tend to get in trouble more when you're younger and you're male. But some of those same factors like parental involvement, does requiring a bail to be posted necessitate the involvement of family or friends, basically someone's social support network? And how does this sort of involvement limit additional criminal activity at the adult stage of criminal prosecution?
Well, now we're back to adult prosecution because obviously in Florida there's no bail for juveniles.
Right.
They're either detained or they're sent home with ankle monitors or in the custody of their parents. But I believe that friends and family are involved because traditionally when you're locked up in jail, that's who you call, friends or family, and they post your bail. And then you have a responsibility to them. I love to talk about mamas. Believe it or not, most people love their mama. Most people that are criminals love their mama. And I love the fact that mamas, no matter how aggravating you are, and no matter how much crime you commit, mamas always run to you. And I'm grateful for mamas. The majority of the time, if mama has to put up the bail or leverage your house or her car, the son pays attention majority of the time. And at the end of the day, when he shows up for court and the bail bondsman is paid their percentage, because bail bonds is an insurance. It's just an insurance guarantee that you'll show up. It works out well. But if the family's not involved, if friends are not involved, or if you don't have any skin in the game by having to put up your own bail, then what accountability and responsibility is there? And who's there to make sure that you receive the support to do what you're supposed to do? So yes, it's very important.
Well, one of the things that I listened to, some college professor who actually seemed to be, not to the far left on this particular issue, was talking about how lowering the transactional cost of committing crimes, and then he was simply referring to zero bail situations, actually caused an increase in crime. And so I guess one of the questions when you're dealing with bail is how does requiring defendants to give assurance that they will come back to court, just because most defendants will get out. I mean, whether you're getting out on a bail or whether you're getting out without bail, there's a large percentage of those defendants are going to get out pre-trial. So how does requiring them to post a bond versus simply letting them go, how does that lower crime going forward versus simply churning them back out to address court down the road?
Well, because if they get in trouble again in the state of Florida, there's this thing called Parker v. State. So if they bond out and then they go out and commit other crime, you can put them back in jail. The bail bondsman goes off bond, and the courts won't allow them back out until they show up at court. And here's the attitude. The attitude is, hey, we've allowed you to post bond or do a bail. And so you could go back to work or you could go back to your normal life. But if your normal life is committing crime, then it's obvious to us while you're out, you're going to commit crime. So when the law enforcement agency arrests you again and they request what we call a Parker v. State, then we're not going to let you back out of jail because you're still committing crime. And it works beautifully that way. Also, that if you're out on bond and the bail bondsmen are very good at finding people that don't show up for court, they bond people who show a proclivity to come back to court, and they get enough data so that they can find them. So the bondsman is the assurance to the court, but the bondsman is also the support infrastructure for the person to come back to court. So, and it works well. Our bondsmen are not enemies, they're our friends. They're our friends in the criminal justice system that says, hey, I've got an insurance policy to the government that I can get you back to court, and I'm going to work with you to make sure you do go back to court. And they do.
Let's kind of talk about the politics of this particular issue as it's coming up. You're an elected official, so I'm sure you've got your ear to the ground as far as political stuff. The red wave that didn't quite materialize like we thought it was, and I think there's lots of reasons for that. I know that in my area, the governor was reelected and she's a Democrat, even though all the other statewide races, stayed Republican. And I think that largely had an impact here was related to the abortion case, because there was an abortion amendment that was on the primary docket that got everybody all worked up after the Dobbs hearing. The midterm results are still being digested. And as I noted on this article before, the bail reformers are trying to claim that crime really wasn't an issue after all. And I don't think that's actually true. Specifically in areas where bail reform was really a central issue, specifically upstate New York and Central California, Republicans with an anti-crime message did very well. And more importantly, those are areas where bail reforms had already been very publicly implemented and poor results were obviously visible. Some of these other areas where the bail reform is more on the sly, basically, we're just going to kind of let people go. We haven't done anything official, but because of COVID, I mean, I know my jail's population dropped 50% after COVID. It's back up to the levels that it was before because they're starting to figure out, hey, that doesn't work, but they're still churning people over to a certain extent right now. It's still early, but are we likely to see more of what I would call pro-crime policies on the horizon, or will the Democrats continue to walk away from bail reform pro-crime and anti-police agenda that they've been selling before? Are they going to back away from that because it didn't work as well as they thought? Or are they going to say, yeah, we scraped by the skin of our teeth and we can keep going down this road?
First and foremost, I want to point out there was a red wave in Florida.
That's true. Very much true.
And there could have been in the rest of the states if we'd have put the right candidates up, because the average voter that's not involved in politics votes for the person that they truly believe is best for their community and state, and that's what you saw. It was either a failure on the Republicans' part for putting the wrong person up, or the Democrat in that particular community was doing a really good job, or at least convincing folks that they were doing a really good job. So crime is on the forefront of everybody's mind. You know, people want to be safe and people want to feel safe. And I think when they started this defund the police, when they started this no bail jail, when they started letting these people out, they did not believe that crime was going to continue to proliferate. They got away with that by the skin of their teeth. I think in most of the communities, they will ease away from that. They don't want to admit it, but I think most of them will. We're already seeing that. These places that were wanting to defund the police are going back and funding the police. So we're seeing that occur, because if you look at the statistical probabilities, if you look at the statistics, whether you're a Democrat, a Republican, independent, or you're not registered to vote, the overwhelming majority of the people appreciate and understand the need for the police. If police aren't liked in a community, it's usually not the community's fault. It's the police agency's fault. It's the leadership's fault. My experience, and I've taught this, and I have been involved with police administration all over the United States with my colleagues. And I can tell you that people want to like the police, and if they don't, it's because the police aren't allowing them to like them. And there needs to be reform inside that police agency. But the Democrats just barely got away with that, and they did and the reason they got away with it is because the abortion issue popped up in the last 6 months before the election. Had that ruling not come out, then, because they can only vote one time, they can't vote for this person based upon the abortion issue, this person based on the criminal justice issue, this person based on the economic or the inflation issue. They only get to vote one time. Had it not been for that issue, because of the inflation, because of the crime, there would have been a red wave. And not because, and I'm not saying that there would have been a red wave because they were just that excited about the Republicans. There would have been a red wave because they're that disappointed in the Democrats at that moment in time. So, because once again, I truly believe when you get to the majority of the people in the country that are not actively hooked into politics, they truly in their mind and hearts vote for the best person. So at the end of the day, if the Democrats that embraced crime or embraced, reducing people in jail and all of that, if they got away with it, they're probably not going to go back for a second dose of it, is my guess. But here's what I've never understood. And if somebody can tell me the answer to this, I would appreciate it. As an elected official, why would I want to vote with criminals to get them out of jail when they can't vote or don't vote? Their family, by and large, can't vote or don't vote. And then they go out, when I get them out of jail as an elected official, as they have in many parts of the country, then once I get them out, then they go victimize people who can vote and do vote.
Right.
And they steal from people and they scare people and they terrorize people. I've never understand why elected officials will play to the people that can't help them politically as opposed to protecting the people that can help them politically. I don't understand that, because the bottom line to it is, it's not that we're not going to be fair and equitable and give opportunity to everybody. We are. The criminal justice system is not a bad thing. The criminal justice is a system to hold people accountable and to teach them and coach them and give them opportunities to correct their behavior and then to prosper in society along with everybody else. So I've never understood the advantage. Now, I understand if any group of politicians wants to provide more programs, more oversight, more opportunities for those that are in trouble to try to help them on the right path. I get that. But letting them out of jail or prison with no appropriate oversight to victimize the community, it makes no sense at all. I don't understand it. And it backfired on the Democrats.
Well, yeah, I don't understand what voting block it is that you're trying to appeal to that. And if you really do think there, as a legislator, if you really do think there's a problem with particular crimes, that they shouldn't be illegal, you have control over what laws are on the books as a legislature. You'd go and say, hey, we need to repeal this because this is wrong. And this is affecting too many people. We can do away with the crime. You don't have to sit there and go, well, we're going to keep this crime on the books, but we're really not going to enforce it by defunding, the people and the mechanisms we would have to hold people accountable for violating those laws. You're right. It makes absolutely no sense. And I have no idea from a political standpoint what the people politically that are supporting this, who it is they're trying to appeal to.
Well, I always like to tell folks this. I am out in the community every day, whether I'm giving public speeches or I'm going to events, I'm interacting with people. There's scarcely a week that goes by that somebody doesn't come up to me, want their picture with me, and tell me they've been in my jail. And then I've had them tell me, I want you to thank the deputy that arrested me. When I got in jail, I went to a faith-based dorm. When I got in jail, I was able to be a trustee, and you taught me food services and gave me a certificate. Or you put me on a landscape crew that I volunteered for, and you gave me a certificate. I got out and I got a job. I had a man that went to an auction. I auctioned off lunches with the sheriff or days with the sheriff. Man had been in and out of jail his entire adult life. He got out of jail. He straightened up. He went to work at a water recycling company, and he ended up being the boss. Wow. He paid $250 to come sit in the cafeteria inside the jail with me and eat another jail meal. And he'd been in and out of my jail forever. And I asked him why he did that. He said, well, when you can be in and out of this jail enough to know the detention deputies over your life, and you straighten up, and he said, I got married, I went to church, I was saved, I got a job, I had a kid, and now I want to prove to myself that I can walk into this jail, sit down with the sheriff, eat lunch, have a conversation, and get up and walk out of that jail when I want to. I have arrived in society. He said, but if y'all hadn't have put me in jail over and over, I would have been dead today. Y'all saved my life. That didn't make my day. That made my life, because the criminal justice system is there to help people and to protect the rest of the people while we're trying to help. We do lots of good things. If you don't take advantage of that while you're in jail, that's on you.
No, I agree. I've actually had a handful, not as many as you, but obviously a handful of people that we've had to pick up and put back in jail because they were, out of control or not going to court or using drugs or whatever the case was. And they've called me back later on to thank me. Thank you for doing that. I wouldn't have survived if you hadn't done that. I appreciate you doing that. I'm sorry I missed court on you, but thank you for taking care of that. And I'm in a better place now. So let's sort of wrap this up with a little bit of non-bail self-help here. I'm looking at your resume and all the things you've accomplished, and I'm really struck, even just listening to you today, by how many irons you have in the fire. Clearly, you have some pretty good motivational and organizational skills. You're in charge of a very large, complex organization, and you participate in several others. What is your advice for those of us that are organizationally challenged? I know I'm just trying to finish my month in here, so I don't know if I can handle all that, but what skills do we need to become more like Sheriff Grady Judd?
Well, first and foremost, I tell people, surround yourself with people that are much smarter than you are. I hire the brightest and the best. They come up through the organization. My command staff, my director of communications that's here with me today has been here almost 30 years. My chief of staff's been here 35 years. My chiefs and majors have been here 25 years. And then I coach. And when we come into this conference room and I'm the big boss, and they look me in the eye and go, boss, that's an idea, but it's really not a good idea. We do this by what I call the last shot, but my folks have autonomy to do the job. They have autonomy to do the job within the guidelines we've set forward. Okay, we all work together on strategic plans, but I have respect and the love for these people and tell them the only way you can lose your job is if you don't stop me from running off the cliff. So I give the credit to all the men and women of the sheriff's office that do a really good job. And we hire once a month, and I tell the young men and women, this is a real easy job to keep. You got to be honest, ethical, and moral all of the time. You've got to deliver customer service with a sense of urgency. You've got to talk to and treat people like you'd want your mama talked to and treated. And if you ever have to use what we call protective action, to wrestle, to fight, obviously we never want to have to shoot, but occasionally we do. You make sure that the other person made you do that. That was not a decision on your part, but it was a reaction to them forcing you to that position. And then you treat them like family. You engage with them. You celebrate with them. You're with them during the most difficult times, because you know people don't need you in the good times, and they don't forget how you treat them during the tough times. But when you do that and you build a team and you're loyal to them and you trust them, then they're loyal to you and they trust you. At the end of the day, it works. But for me, I tell folks, I wake up every day and I say my prayers and I ask for direction to do the right things today. And then every night I say my prayers and ask forgiveness for everything I screwed up today. And I promise to try to do better tomorrow. But your people are the reason you're successful.
You know, faith gets sort of looked down upon in today's society, and it really shouldn't. There's so many people that I know and that I've dealt with and that are in position of power and authority and that are doing good work like yourself that have that faith-based background. And I think we really need to look back at that more.
No, I think it is necessary. And we have folks of all religious backgrounds here, and we respect that. What faith you are, what religious foundations you believe in or you practice, we want to encourage that environment. So we have Christians that work here, we have folks of the Jewish faith, we have people that are of the Muslim faith that work here. We respect everyone's personal religious perspective, and we encourage their personal religious perspective, because until you're right with God, nothing else works in your personal life or your professional life. And I'm not shy about that. I speak in church. I go to wherever people ask me to go to engage, but I am not shy about the fact that there is a greater being. And when you figure that out, life gets a whole lot better.
Well, and you're looking at life beyond just yourself. And so if you're running an organization like this, or you're in public service, those things, it is important for you to look and see the greater good that you're doing, not just, hey, how am I advancing my career?
Sure. And we call it servant leadership, but see, our job is to be a very important part of the criminal justice system. But 80% of our day has nothing to do with enforcing the law.
Right.
We are actively involved in the community, helping the community. We have outreach. We were doing community-oriented policing before community-oriented policing was cool. They said, oh, they've come up with these different buzzwords that, oh, you've got to have discretion. And well, we had discretion long before discretion was cool. Oh, you've got, but the bottom line is, how would you want to be treated if you were in that position? And if you're down and out and need help, whether you're homeless, when our lieutenants all have a credit card in their pocket. If we answer a call for service and we go there and there's no food or milk in the house, the baby doesn't have diapers, there's roaches running all over the place, we have a credit card in our pocket to our charity, not government money, our charity. And we have a very wealthy philanthropist that has a endless well of money they put in our charity. We go out, we buy food. We have a company that sprays for rodents. We buy clothes. We help people. And do you know what? That catches on with your deputies. And when it catches on with your deputies that this is pretty cool helping people, and you help people, the next time you go into that neighborhood on a hot disturbance, the people that live there are on your side instead of on the bad guy side.
Right.
So what we do is we build trust and we build friends in the neighborhoods, in the communities every day, because what? It's the right thing to do. When you respect people first, most of them respect you back. When you treat people fair first, the majority of them treat you fair back. And there's no absolutes in life, so you don't worry about that small percentage that are failures. You just look for the opportunity to help others. And I found that the others will help you 10,000 times what you help them.
And you'll see life, you'll be a lot happier in life if you take that approach to it anyway.
That's how we do work.
Thank you, Sheriff Judd, very much for taking the time to talk to us today. It's really been illuminating. Yes, sir.
Have a very Merry Christmas and happy and safe and prosperous New Year.
You too. Thank you very much.
Talk to you soon.
All
Thank you for joining us today on the Bail in the Midwest podcast.